Hi, welcome to my Siege of the Atlas and Archnemesis review. Grinding Gear Games released Path of Exile Siege of the Atlas on February 4th, a brand new expansion changing how players interact with the endgame system that is called the Atlas. On top of that, they have also given us a league called Archnemesis. We're only gonna talk about the league and the expansion itself, and not about the patch and the changes that came with it, like, oh, I really like this QL change. I'm not gonna talk about stuff like this. Quick story overview. Believe me, this matters. At least to me it matters. After you finish the story, you travel to Karui Shores, which you may remember if you had beaten a certain boss in the previous expansions. You look around, see the expedition NPCs, enjoy a breeze on the beach, and find Kirik in his new headquarters. Trademarked, copyrighted. Sana has left and pursues her own goals. So Kirik is now here to help us and introduce us to the Atlas. In my opinion, great to have a bigger story aspect now on the Atlas, allowing newer players to understand this whole Atlas thing more and or better. It's obviously more streamlined, so there is less exploration and finding stuff out, because he literally gives you the map and all this stuff, but I think it's probably not a bad idea, because you can get people hooked, they are more invested, and they continue to play, and the longer they play, they might spend money, blah blah blah. I feel like it's a good thing. So as mentioned, you're given your first map, you slap it in the map device, and you're off killing dozens of monsters. If you have fixed your elemental resistances. Otherwise, you will, you'll die. With the map boss defeated, you return to Kirik, and this is where you will open the Atlas. Every dot is a map, and to discover the new endgame bosses, more difficult content, and of course better loot, you have to work your way up to the top of the Atlas. A much better system, so instead of branching outwards in the old Atlas, we now branch upwards, kind of makes sense. You go from the bottom to the top, and to leave you with some surprises when you actually play through the new, story and play deeper into the end game, you will encounter things in a map later on that allow you to call the influence of two new eldritch beings. One of it is the water balloon guy, and the other one is someone who was obsessed with Zuko from The Last Airbender. Being able to call upon the influence of these eldritch beings, you can now manually call them to the map. If you do, your map will be filled with eldritch enemies called Balloon Boys and Zuko enjoyers. This is the worst joke I have ever written, and we're gonna roll with it, baby. Alright, let us run it down, mate. Let us run all the gameplay additions, down the list. Let's just quickly go through them. First off, we got new Eldritch influenced items that have a wide variety of modifiers on items that can be quite powerful. And of course, we got Eldritch currency items to craft or manipulate items. Perfect. On top of that, you can use these Eldritch items on items you already have, which means the progression to these super strong influenced items that you may be able to craft later on, it's kind of like a middle point. You can either live with these decently rolled Eldritch influenced items, and they're strong enough to beat all the bosses in the game, more or less, or you want to go for even more Eldritch modifiers that are bigger, stronger, whatever, or you go for completely different influence items. So I think it's a good middle point for people, right? It's a nice little step between the really big, juicy stuff. You can just slap on these new currency items, you're like, oh cool, I have two new fun modifiers on my items now that help me. Perfect, sweet, What else do you want? What, you want free exalts? You want the mage plant? You want a headhunter? No. Anyways, during your mapping, you can find altars now. Altars spawn randomly and allow you to pray to the balloon gods and add another layer on top of, the regular gameplay, so you have a chance to get more loot. Of course, what else are we here? Just to enjoy life? Enjoy the breeze on a sunny day? No, it's loot, baby. You can increase the reward of a variety of things, but have to live with negative effects for the entire map. Negative effects like less cold resistance, or thinking water balloons filled with mayo is funny. It's not. Stop throwing mayo balloons on my house, please. So the only problem is that clicking these altars during mapping gameplay can be quite dangerous if there is a lot of stuff happening in the map that you're running, right? Sometimes you juice a map really a lot, and there's already so much overlapping content, and now you have to click these altars while you're mapping. It's I'm sure they can find out another way. I guess it also kind of makes sense that there are altars on the ground, because you influence kind of the ground of the whole area, right? You see the effects of it. It kind of works, it kind of doesn't. It's just there now, you know? And you could just ignore the altars. You're throwing loot away, but sometimes I just throw loot away because I don't want to die, you know? XP is also kind of important, right? If you're like 93 and you need 2 more levels to hit that, you know, last bit in your cluster jewel, then I will just not take the altars for a couple maps. Who cares? Sorry, I rambled too much there. Atlas passive skill tree is just magnificent. Having the complete freedom on the type of content you want to run is just, you know, just yes, please, more. So many strategies you can try out and play, which could take you multiple months or weeks. It's just beautiful. It's just, I think we all love it. I don't need to talk about this more. Let's move on. New uniques they added have been quickly accepted by the community, like Omniscience and Ashes of the Stars. Crazy to think that they are nailing uniques more and more, because I remember them adding uniques maybe 2 to 3 leagues ago, and no one cared. At least I didn't see anyone care, right? There's some uniques that were like added, I think like back in Harvest, and we got 1, and then they changed the Forbidden Shackle thing now, which became now the normal one or something. It's like, okay, you know, sometimes less and actually testing it properly, sometimes more. They also changed 2 build archetypes, but I'm not talking about this because we aren't talking about the patch itself, but more about the specific content of, you know, what they added. Moving on to visuals. Say it with me, people. Visual clarity. This is not a meme. This is a cry for help, dude. So how is it? As someone who is just a player, I can't say if they changed things from a gameplay perspective. Maybe they did, and I didn't notice, but in general, the game has great to good visual clarity. Up to a certain point, when you start having dozens or hundreds of enemies and attacks overlap. But that is something you can't change in this game, because that is the fun part of having a ton of enemies and mowing them down. At least, obviously, to me, I enjoy this. Some people might be like, no, I kind of like a slower gameplay and, you know, caring about some enemies and stuff like this. Only thing I will appreciate in general in any game is big attacks dealing a lot of damage and small attacks dealing less damage. Unsure if we will ever see that in Path of Exile. Now, what about graphical fidelity? Let me just quickly Google this, because I have no idea what it is. Graphical fidelity can be defined as the combination of any amount of the 3 things that make up beautiful games, or virtual beauty in general. Detail, resolution, and frame rate. If you look at Path of Exile in a higher resolution, as well as most settings turned to high, especially textures, the game looks good and sometimes absolutely incredible. I know it's kind of a meme in Path of Exile, like, wait, you see actually the textures on the ground? Ha! Original joke here. I still get awestruck when entering that one area in Act 9, probably gameplay on screen. It just looks beautiful. It looks watery, wet, like sticky ground, and it's just the eyes on the wall. It is beautifully disgusting. I love it every single time. Like, if you go through this area and you have low settings turned on, I don't know what you're doing, dude. Like, do you really care about the 20 FPS more? I mean, sure, if you want to reach somewhat like 60 FPS, but also more about that in a bit. Of course, not every area looks like the one I'm showing you. Some just look okay. You know, sometimes the labyrinth looks okay-ish. To be honest, the labyrinth looks pretty cool sometimes with global illumination. I highly recommend turning this on. Please, for the love of the game you appreciate so much, turn on global illumination. Just kill 10 FPS or something in your average game. Who cares? It looks so good. Of course, the game is massive, so nothing can look absolutely incredible, no matter in what resolution you're looking at it. So what about frame rate? So TLDR, a stable frame rate in the story, and worse depending on what you do in the end game. You can't have Blight, Delirium, and Beyond overlapping and have Einhard try to hit the 3 yellow beasts on top of your attacks and... Anyways, you get the point. But that is the beauty of PoE, right? Having the choices of which content you want to run that you can either handle, like your build can handle, or even your machine can handle. If your system can't handle a certain content on the graphic settings you prefer, then you have to either change the content or start upgrading your system. I know people probably don't want to hear this, but you can't expect a game that is a service, it's not a product, to constantly have the same amount of quality and frame rate and resolution. Like, the game changes, gets updated, so it looks better over time to fit the current year it is in. So you also need to at some point update your system. Just like how the game gets updated, you need to update your hardware and your machine or PC or whatever, fits right now. In the end, developers can only do so much, but having an up-to-date PC for the game you want to play is up to you. We have gotten another engine update recently, but it is in beta and new, so we will see how the DX12 renderer develops over the next few months. Sorry for that little ramble there. Let's go back on topic. Siege of the Atlas has solid visual clarity. Sure, the mapping experience can be quite extreme with so many overlapping effects, but the new bosses are amazing. They really nailed it. Besides the vomit boss, but we're not gonna talk about him. On the other side, does your vomit has visual clarity? Yeah, I don't think so. The music from Camille is always hitting all the right spots during boss battles, and the sound effects are punchy, dangerous, or creepy when they need to be. And we can't forget about the voice acting. Kirik being the big star on top of having the Envoy, and the Maven really polishes up the Atlas progression and makes you feel like you're part of something bigger. Now, from an amazing endgame expansion that I very much enjoy and will enjoy for a while, let us talk about the League. Yikes. I mean, the name is cool. Archnemesis. Sounds pretty good. Alright, let's go to the issues. You can find multiple statues, about 4 to 6 if I remember correctly, in every instance with rare monsters chained to it. After adding a reagent, which adds powerful modifiers to that rare monster, it breaks free and will attack you. Reagents not only added modifiers, but also specific rewards. For example, monsters drop one unique item or drop essences. Some reagents can be combined on the enemy to add more challenge and more rewards. So from statue to statue, the reagent you added previously gets added to the next one, and then to the next one, and then to the next one. So you can have 4 different reagents, making the fight pretty difficult at the end, but also stacking all the previous rewards. Very cool system. But also, on top of that, some reagents can combine. That's also what I wanted to mention here. So for people who didn't play a lot, or just to have it in a recording, you can combine certain reagents, which turn into completely new modifiers. So a new name of modifiers. So if you add, I don't know, fire and ice, it turns into fire ice or something. It's a stupid name that I just came up with. But I think you get the point, right? So in typical GGG fashion, you can combine reagents multiple times until you have reagents that say all drops are unique items or all drops are currency items, stuff like this. So potentially giving you some insane drops. Of course, adding or making these reagents takes time, planning, and generally effort during the mapping process, which already is quite bloated. Remember back like, I don't know, 8 minutes ago when I was talking about the clicking the altars? Now you have to click the altars while you're probably getting attacked, and then you need to clear everything around the Archnemesis statues. And then there's this one rare skeleton archer that just hits you for 8k damage. Very cool. To be honest, I stopped caring about the League a couple of weeks into it. I didn't reach all the big reagent recipes because it was just too tedious, and the only real way to figure this out is to go to a third-party website. In some cases, I don't mind going through a third-party website sometimes, right? If I really want to get the nitty-gritty stuff to really figure this out. For example, you know about an item in Terraria, you know which enemy drops it, but you just want to know the percentage, like specifically. Oh, it's 2% from the ice turtles or something. I think it was 2% when I played it. Awesome, poggers. Did you know I farmed 4 hours for this goddamn item from these stupid turtle enemies? It's great. Back to Archnemesis. In some cases, I don't mind that. But how difficult is it to add a help screen with all that info? More on that when we talk about the changes in 3.18 in this video. Does this mean the League is bad? Depending on the build, no. I enjoyed Archnemesis again after some time when I played Mage Skellies. Why? Because it bursts down most Archnemesis enemies that usually one-shot. So I'm generally more of a zoomer, mapper kind of guy. So anything that adds strong, powerful enemies in maps that can one-shot me is something I don't like because, I die a lot. I lose XP, it takes me longer to get to the next level, I need the skill points to get to my clusters or fill out more of my clusters, it just sucks. Let us leave it at one point. It was a leak, or it is a leak, that fits a type of player that isn't me. Overall, I enjoyed the visuals. Statues definitely catch your eyes wherever they were. The breaking free of the monsters looked cool. Could have been made a bit more epic depending on the reagents used or the type of reagent, right? Like if you use more reagent, it's more aggressive how it breaks apart. Or maybe the tier of reagent that you used on it, it maybe breaks apart also more extreme. But yeah, either way, you know, these are the tiny little things. It doesn't matter anymore. This time we had no music related to the leak, but the sound effects of the breaking free of the monsters was very satisfying. I really liked how it went into multiple stages, like the chains broke off slowly. Like it was pretty cool, you know. It's different than the essence mobs, where you just click multiple times and then they just break free. So it's good. All right, hot topic, boys. Archnemesis in 3.18. Today's Tuesday, the 10th of May, so now I know a little bit more, partially from the trailer and the reveal of Sentinel or 3.18, but also I have watched the Baeclast episode, the podcast episode, and yeah, lots of infos there, so let's go through it quickly. So the TLDR, for people who don't know what Archnemesis and 3.18, like the new Sentinel league is all about, so certain modifiers on rare and magic monsters previously are now Archnemesis modifiers. So they pretty much replace the old modifiers with new stuff. Generally, it is easier to read because it's one modifier that has a meaning. The problem is the meaning of it. I can see the enemy, the rare mob, you know, like it's yellow, it's blinking, it's glowing, whatever. It has a different look to it, maybe because of certain Archnemesis modifiers. I can probably somewhat guess sometimes what the Archnemesis modifier is. The problem is the understanding of the modifier. Because now we don't have the whole increased physical as fire, it probably just says something about, I don't know. And that's the problem, I don't know. I have played Archnemesis, I don't know these modifiers. I have literally no idea. It's so funny actually how I wrote this paragraph that I'm going to read now, and it literally got brought up in the podcast. I love it, it's great. So first off, I really hope they add a page in the help tab that lists every single Archnemesis modifier. If not, I'm going to be very mad, because how on earth should a player understand what Malediction does? If a player interacts with a rare monster, is able to read the modifier it has on, which is easier now to read, and then dies or survives, he or she should be able to open the help tab, use a goddamn search function to look up what that modifier did. People can now figure out in the game what killed them or why it was a challenge to kill that monster. This info needs to be in the game if they want us to care about these rare monsters now. And of course magic monsters on top of that. That is literally what Tarky, I think, talked about the help page. Chris pretty much shot them down and was like, pretty much not even like a 1% or I don't know, or 1 digit open the help page, something like this. And then then Siggy actually went with a much better idea than I think I had. I mean, I think I saw it in my head. I pretty much saw it in my head, how I want the list to look like. But I think Siggy mentioned a glossary. So a glossary of just a modifier and the explanation below it, and then a space, you know, just nothingness, and then the next Archnemesis modifier and the explanation, and just all the way down with a search function on the top left or bottom right, probably bottom right, with the Archnemesis logo on the top right. That's all we need. That is all we need. That's not huge UI changes. I think it's just another tab added with a logo and a search function of the thing that is in that box, not more. I know this is probably a ton of work because they added apparently 80 Archnemesis modifiers now, so there are way more than in the league actually itself. Probably scaled them down, split them apart, you know, gave them a little bit something to spice things up. It's cool. It's cool seeing this. I hope they aren't too powerful. I hope they are somewhat easy to read, and I hope we can have this in the game itself. Chris had a good point with people just don't open the help tab. I, to be honest, haven't looked in the help tab, to be honest, in a while, but... And I think Noogie had another idea, which I really enjoyed as well, which is the whole exploration part and figuring things out by if you've killed that Archnemesis mob, or a mob with an Archnemesis modifier on it, it then gets unlocked, account-wide. That's also a really cool idea. I feel like that's way more, I feel like that's way more time consuming to make that. That would be very sick. I feel like we can get the help page first and maybe a thing afterwards, right? Maybe in a couple of years we can have something like this. But first off, I just want the basic help page. Just give me the base infos, just the base infos. I don't want to go to the wiki to look this stuff up, preferably, of course, right? Please watch the podcast, by the way. It was amazing. It was like 3 hours of fun, of jokes, of casual talk, of deep talk. I just loved it. Anyways, let's just all hope Archnemesis got really scaled down and maybe has some really high, dangerous mobs later on in like tier 16s. I'm fine with that to a degree, but I just don't want to like get slapped in tier 8 maps, please. I'm really good at making short, concise videos. I'm sure the video is already over 20 minutes long, isn't it? In conclusion, Siege of the Atlas is amazing and probably the best endgame we have ever had. There is so much to explore, try and play, from the new uniques to the Atlas passives to bosses, old builds that became exciting again, and more. About 1 or 2 days ago when I wrote this, I actually had this itching of wanting to play more Path of Exile. We are literally 4 days away from a new league, and I still want to play this league. The current one, right now, because it's just so goddamn fun. On the other hand, Archnemesis was okay and a bit forgettable, but not so forgettable now, because it will be in the core game from 3.18 and onwards. Thank you so much for watching this video. This video was brought to you by me. You thought there's a sponsor read? Gotcha. Memes aside, hope you enjoyed. If you want to watch me live, please go check out the Twitch channel, twitch.tv/DanielBR93, and I highly recommend checking out CGD's Q&A with Chris Wilson, and then of course the Baeclast episode that recently released. Can highly recommend it. Links down in the description, and I will see you all on Friday and also on Saturday when I stream the new league, and let's see how it goes. Let's see how Sentinel is, how good it is, and I will give you my raw reaction to everything. Raw, hardcore, unprotected. How do you end videos? Anyways, bye.